Violet Chen had spent 26 New Year's Eves alone, but this one felt different in a way she couldn't name. Maybe it was the particular quality of silence in her apartment tonight, heavy and expectant, like the air before a storm. Or maybe it was because she'd finally admitted something to herself around 10 p.m., somewhere between her second glass of wine and the moment she'd caught her reflection in the darkened window. She was in love with a man who barely knew she existed beyond her ability to schedule his meetings and screen his calls. Ridiculous, pathetic even. Violet set down her wine glass on the coffee table, next to the half-eaten container of pad thai she'd ordered because cooking for one on New Year's Eve felt too depressing even for her. The TV played some countdown show she wasn't watching, all glitter and forced enthusiasm, people packed into Times Square like sardines, kissing strangers at midnight because at least strangers were better than no one. She pulled her knees to her chest, the oversized sweater she wore slipping off one shoulder. It was his sweater, technically, left behind at the office 6 months ago after some late-night emergency with the Castellano contracts. She'd meant to return it, had told herself every day for a week that tomorrow she'd bring it back, cleaned and folded. But tomorrow kept not coming, and eventually the sweater had migrated to her apartment, and now here she was, wearing her boss's clothes on New Year's Eve like some kind of creep. The thing about being alone wasn't the absence of people. Violet had gotten used to that. No parents, they died when she was too young to remember them properly. No siblings. Her grandmother had raised her in that cramped apartment in Chichester until she'd passed 3 years ago, leaving Violet with a shoebox of old photographs and a jade bracelet she never took off. No, the hard part about being alone was the way it made you invisible. Like you could disappear entirely, and the world would just close up around the space you'd occupied, smooth and seamless, as if you'd never been there at all. At work, she was good at invisible. Efficient, quiet, anticipating needs before they were spoken. She knew how Alessandro Marchetti took his coffee, knew which calls he'd take and which to deflect, knew the slight tightening around his eyes that meant he was about to lose his temper and needed the room cleared. 2.5 years of watching him, learning him, and he'd probably never noticed the way her hands shook the first time he'd smiled at her. Probably never noticed that she stayed late, not because the work required it, but because going home to an empty apartment felt worse than staying in an office where at least his presence lingered in the air. God, when had she become this person? This sad, pathetic woman pinning after a man so far out of her league, they weren't even playing the same sport. Alessandro Marchetti was the kind of handsome that made people stupid. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that missed nothing, the kind of presence that changed the energy of a room the moment he entered it. He wore power like other men wore cologne, effortless and intoxicating. And he was dangerous. She wasn't naive about that. Didn't let herself think too hard about the men who came to the office sometimes, the ones with cold eyes and expensive suits who spoke in low voices about things she pretended not to hear. Didn't question the meetings that happened after hours, or why his calendar sometimes had blocks of time marked only with initials she didn't recognize. She was good at not asking questions, good at being exactly what he needed her to be, competent, discreet, forgettable. Except she didn't want to be forgettable, not to him. Violet reached for her wine glass again, then stopped. She'd had enough. Any more and tomorrow would hurt, and she had a rule about New Year's Day. No hangovers, no wallowing, no looking back. January 1st was for pretending everything was fine, for going to the gym she never actually used, for meal prepping salads she'd throw out by Wednesday. The countdown show cut to commercial. 11:30. 30 minutes until midnight, until another year officially behind her, until she could stop pretending this night was anything other than what it was. Her phone sat face down on the coffee table. She hadn't checked it in an hour. Hadn't wanted to see the nothing waiting for her there. No texts, no calls, no Happy New Year messages from friends she didn't have. But something made her reach for it now. Maybe masochism. Maybe hope, stupid and stubborn, that refused to die no matter how many times she killed it. 3 missed calls. Violet's heart stopped, then started again too fast, all from the same number, his number. Why would Alessandro be calling her at 11:30 on New Year's Eve? Her thumb hovered over the screen. She should call back. That's what a good secretary would do. Efficient, reliable, always available. But her hands were shaking, and the wine had made everything feel slightly unreal, and she couldn't imagine what emergency could possibly require her attention tonight of all nights. Before she could decide, the phone rang again. His name on the screen, stark and undeniable. She answered before she could think better of it. Mr. Marchetti. Violet. His voice was rough, urgent in a way she'd never heard before. Where are you? I'm at home. Is everything okay? A pause. She heard something in the background, traffic maybe, or voices. What's your address? My address? The question didn't make sense. I don't understand. Your address, Violet, now. There was something in his tone that bypassed her confusion entirely, went straight to the part of her brain that had been trained to respond to his commands. She rattled off the address, that shabby building in Queens with the broken buzzer and the neighbor who played music too loud. Don't leave your apartment. Don't open the door for anyone. He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice was lower, almost gentle. Anyone except me. I'll be there soon. The line went dead. Violet stared at her phone, her reflection ghostly on the black screen. Had that actually just happened? Had Alessandro Marchetti, her boss, the man she'd convinced herself saw her as nothing more than a particularly useful piece of office equipment, just demanded her address and told her he was coming here? The wine. It had to be the wine. She was hallucinating, or dreaming, or having some kind of breakdown brought on by loneliness and too many rom-coms. But her phone showed the call log, proof that it had been real. 4 calls from him, the last one ending 30 seconds ago. Violet stood up too fast, the room tilting slightly. She looked down at herself. The sweater, his sweater, hung almost to her knees over a pair of leggings with a hole in one knee. Her hair was in a messy knot on top of her head. She wasn't wearing a bra. Her face was bare of makeup, and she probably had pad ties stuck in her teeth. This was not how you were supposed to look when the man you'd been secretly in love with for 2 years showed up at your apartment. She lunged for the bathroom, nearly tripping over the coffee table. Brushed her teeth, splashed cold water on her face, tried to do something with her hair that didn't scream, gave up on life. Changed into a clean sweater, this one actually hers, then changed back because what if he recognized his sweater and it was weird, then changed into the clean one again because she was being insane. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. Violet froze in the middle of her tiny living room, her heart hammering against her ribs. For a wild moment, she considered not answering. Considered pretending she wasn't home, wasn't standing 5 feet from the door trying to remember how to breathe. But then he knocked again, and she heard his voice muffled through the door. Violet, it's me. Her feet moved without permission from her brain. She crossed the room, turned the lock, pulled open the door. Alessandro Marchetti stood in her dingy hallway, looking completely out of place in his expensive coat and perfectly tailored clothes, like a prince who'd wandered into the wrong fairy tale. And he was bleeding. Blood seeped through Alessandro's white shirt, dark and spreading across his ribs on the left side. Not gushing, not arterial, but enough to make Violet's stomach drop. Oh my God. She grabbed his arm, pulling him inside with strength she didn't know she possessed. What happened? Should I call 911? No, the word came out sharp, final. He let her guide him to the couch, moving carefully like each breath cost him. No hospitals, no police. Right, because of course not. Because men like Alessandro Marchetti didn't go to hospitals when they got hurt doing whatever it was that made them dangerous. Violet's hands fluttered uselessly. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what to do. First aid kit. You have one. His eyes found hers, dark and intense even through obvious pain. Yes, under the bathroom sink. Don't move. She ran, nearly slipping on the hardwood in her socks, and ransacked the cabinet until she found the kit her grandmother had insisted she keep stocked. Hydrogen peroxide, gauze, medical tape, antibiotic ointment, scissors. She grabbed a stack of clean towels too and rushed back. Alessandro had shrugged off his coat and was working on the buttons of his shirt, his jaw tight. "Let me—" Violet set everything on the coffee table, pushing aside her wine glass and the pad tie. Her hands trembled as she helped him with the buttons, trying not to think about the fact that she was undressing her boss in her living room at midnight on New Year's Eve. The shirt fell open. Violet had imagined this moment before, in shameful detail during sleepless nights, but never like this. Never with blood and fear making her mouth taste like copper. The wound was a gash across his ribs, maybe 4 inches long, deep enough to bleed freely but not deep enough to be immediately life-threatening. She thought. She hoped. "Knife," Alessandro said, reading her unasked question. "Caught me when I wasn't paying attention. Stupid mistake." "Who?" She stopped herself, pressed a clean towel against the wound. He hissed through his teeth. "Sorry, I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." His hand came up, covered hers where she held the towel. His palm was warm, calloused. "You're doing fine." They stayed like that for a moment, her kneeling on the floor between his knees, his hand over hers, blood soaking through white cotton. The TV was still playing that countdown show, 37 minutes until midnight, people screaming with champagne-drunk joy. "I need to clean it," Violet said quietly. "It's going to hurt." "It already hurts." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. "Do what you need to do." She worked as gently as she could, cleaning the wound with hydrogen peroxide that foamed pink, wiping away blood until she could see the edges clearly. Not as bad as she'd feared. The bleeding was already slowing. "You're good at this," Alessandro said, watching her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. "My grandmother, she had diabetes toward the end. I learned to do wound care." Violet kept her eyes on her hands, on the careful application of antibiotic ointment. Anything but looking at his face. "This needs stitches, really." "Can you butterfly it?" She could. She pressed the edges together with strips of medical tape, creating a makeshift closure that would hold if he didn't do anything stupid. Then gauze, more tape, her fingers steadier now that she'd fallen into the rhythm of the work. "There." She sat back on her heels, surveying her handiwork. Not professional, but it would do. "You should take ibuprofen for the pain and inflammation. And you need to keep it clean, change the dressing twice a day." "Violet," he waited until she looked up at him. "Thank you." The gratitude in his voice unraveled something in her chest. She stood quickly, gathering bloody towels and used gauze. "I'll get you some water, and a clean shirt if you want. I have—" She stopped, face burning. "I have one of yours, actually, from the office. I meant to return it." "Keep it." His eyes tracked her movement as she fled to the kitchen. "It looks better on you anyway." Had she imagined that? The wine, the stress, the surreal horror of the last 10 minutes. Maybe she was hallucinating. Maybe none of this was real. But when she came back with water and ibuprofen, he was still there, solid and real and shirtless on her couch. He took the pills, drank half the glass in one go. "You should rest," Violet said. "You can stay here tonight. I'll take the couch, you can have the bed." "I'm not taking your bed." Alessandro set down the glass. "And I'm not leaving yet." "But you're hurt. You need to." "Violet." He said her name like it meant something, like he'd been practicing it. "Come here." She shouldn't. Every instinct screamed that she was already too close to something that would burn her. But her feet moved anyway, carrying her back to the couch, though she perched on the far end, as much distance as she could manage. Alessandro's gaze traveled around her apartment, taking in details she suddenly saw through his eyes. The shabby furniture, the walls that needed painting, the single shelf of books, the dead plant on the windowsill she kept meaning to throw out. The evidence of her small, lonely life laid bare. "You're alone tonight," he said finally. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." "No plans, no party, no friends expecting you." Violet pulled her sleeves down over her hands. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't." She stopped, started again. "I'm not good at that, people." "You're good with me." "That's different, that's work." "Is it?" Alessandro shifted slightly, angling toward her. The movement made him wince, his hand going to his ribs. These past 2 years working with you, has it felt like just work to you? The question hung between them, dangerous and impossible. Violet's heart was doing something arrhythmic, painful. I don't know what you want me to say, she whispered. The truth, his eyes held hers. Tell me the truth, Violet, tonight, right now. Tell me why you're wearing my sweater on New Year's Eve in an empty apartment instead of being anywhere else in the world. The countdown show erupted in fresh cheers. 23 minutes until midnight. Because, Violet said, and her voice came out raw, everywhere else in the world you wouldn't be there. The silence that followed felt like falling. Like that moment after you jump when you're not sure if you'll fly or crash. Then Alessandro smiled. A real smile, not the polite one he used at the office or the cold one he gave to people he was about to destroy. This one reached his eyes, warmed his whole face, and it was directed at her. Good, he said. That's good. Good. Violet wasn't sure she was breathing correctly. I just admitted that I'm pathetically in love with my boss, and you think that's good. Pathetically? He laughed, then immediately regretted it, his hand pressing against the bandage. Christo, nothing about you is pathetic, Violet Chen. Do you know how many times I've manufactured reasons to call you into my office just to hear your voice? How many late nights I've invented because I couldn't stand the thought of you leaving? The world tilted, reformed itself into a new shape where this was happening, where Alessandro Marchetti was confessing feelings she'd convinced herself were impossible. But you didn't. I know, his expression softened. I told myself it was inappropriate, that you deserved better than getting involved with someone like me. Someone who comes to your door bleeding on New Year's Eve because his life is a fucking mess of violence and complicated family politics. I don't care about that. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I don't care about any of it. I care about you. Alessandro reached across the couch, his hand finding hers. His fingers laced through hers, rough and warm and real. I care about you too, more than I should, more than is probably smart for either of us. So what do we do? Violet asked. Right now, he glanced at the TV, at the glittering ball waiting to drop in Times Square. Right now, I don't want to be anywhere else. Even bleeding on your couch is better than being anywhere you're not. A laugh bubbled up in Violet's chest, slightly hysterical. That's ridiculous. Probably, his thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But it's true. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked, the chaos of the night settling into something quieter. Then Alessandro's expression shifted, considering. Do you have any food? Real food, not. He nodded toward the pad thai containers. Something to celebrate with. Celebrate, you're injured. Superficially. He stood, moving carefully but with more ease than before. The bleeding stopped, the pains manageable, and it's New Year's Eve. We should mark the occasion properly. I don't have much, Violet admitted. Some eggs, bread, cheese, maybe. Alessandro was already reaching for his phone. There's a bodega 2 blocks from here that stays open late. I'm going to run out, get some things. Proper food, champagne. You're not running anywhere. You're hurt. Walking, then. That smile again, devastating. 20 minutes, I promise. Lock the door behind me, don't open it for anyone else. Alessandro. But he was already pulling on his coat, covering the blood-stained shirt. He paused at the door, turned back. When I come back, we're going to do this right. A proper New Year's Eve. You deserve that, Violet. You deserve everything. Then he was gone, and she was alone in her apartment that suddenly felt completely different, like someone had rearranged all the furniture while she wasn't looking. Violet looked down at her hands, half expecting to wake up and discover this had all been a wine-induced dream. But her palms still felt warm where he'd touched her, and there was blood on her towels, and in 15 minutes it would be midnight and Alessandro Marchetti had just told her he cared about her. She stood, surveyed the wreckage of her living room, moved on autopilot, clearing away medical supplies and takeout containers, straightening cushions, put on actual pants, took down her hair and brushed it, left it loose because she'd seen the way his eyes had tracked the movement when she'd done that once at the office. Her phone showed 11:52 when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The knock came, and she opened it to find Alessandro laden with shopping bags, looking ridiculously pleased with himself for someone who'd been stabbed less than an hour ago. "I may have gone overboard," he admitted, carrying everything to her kitchen counter. "But the bodega guy recognized me, gave me the good stuff he keeps in back." Violet peered into the bags. Fresh bread, imported cheese, prosciutto, olives, grapes. 2 bottles of champagne that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Chocolate, the expensive kind that came in individual foil-wrapped pieces. "This is too much," she protested, but she was smiling. "It's not nearly enough." Alessandro was pulling things out, arranging them on her plates with surprising domesticity. "But it's a start." They worked together, her slicing bread while he arranged meat and cheese, and it felt surreal and perfect and terrifying all at once. The countdown show reached its final minutes, the volume of screaming from the TV rising to a crescendo. 60 seconds, Alessandro said, handing her a glass of champagne. They stood in her tiny kitchen, so close she could feel the heat of him, smell his cologne mixed with antiseptic. 50, Violet whispered, and on the TV 1,000,000 people chanted with them. 40. His free hand came up, cupped her face. 30. "Is this real?" she asked. 20. Alessandro's thumb traced her cheekbone, as real as it gets. 10. The city erupted in noise, fireworks and car horns and people shouting from windows. But in Violet's kitchen, there was only silence and champagne bubbles and the man she loved looking at her like she was something precious. "Happy New Year, Violet." "Happy New Year." And then he was kissing her, gentle despite the hunger she could feel thrumming beneath his skin, and the champagne was forgotten, and the food was forgotten, and everything was forgotten except this. His mouth on hers, his hand in her hair, the way her name sounded when he breathed it against her lips. When they finally broke apart, Violet was shaking. Alessandro pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for 2 years, he confessed. "Me too," she laughed, a little breathless, though I imagined fewer stab wounds. "Next year," Alessandro promised. "Next New Year's Eve, I swear. No blood, no violence, just us." "Just us," Violet repeated, and it sounded like a future she'd stopped believing in. Sounded like hope. They ate their impromptu feast sitting on her couch, his arm around her shoulders, her head tucked against his uninjured side. Fed each other chocolate and talked about everything and nothing. Her grandmother, his impossible family, the first day she'd walked into his office and he'd forgotten what he was supposed to be saying. "I thought you hated me," Violet admitted. "You barely looked at me that whole first week." "I couldn't look at you. Every time I did, I forgot how to think." Alessandro pressed a kiss to her temple. "You have no idea the effect you have, do you?" She didn't answer, just burrowed closer, breathing him in. Outside, the city celebrated in the streets. Inside, in her small apartment that had always felt too empty, Violet Chen wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in 26 years, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like everything. Violet woke to winter sunlight streaming through her bedroom curtains and the warm weight of another person in her bed. For a disorienting moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all, the blood, the confession, the kiss that had tasted like champagne and promises. But then Alessandro shifted beside her, his arm tightening around her waist, and she remembered. They'd stayed up until almost 3, talking and kissing and talking some more, until exhaustion had finally pulled them under. He'd refused to let her take the couch, and she'd been too tired to argue, so they'd ended up here, fully clothed, wrapped around each other like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "You're awake," Alessandro murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep. "How did you know?" "Your breathing changed." His hand traced lazy patterns on her hip. "How long have you been up?" 2 minutes, maybe." Violet turned in his arms, careful of his injured side. In the morning light, he looked different, softer somehow, without the armor he wore at the office. His hair was mussed, and there was stubble darkening his jaw, and she wanted to memorize every detail. "How are you feeling?" Like I got stabbed. But he was smiling, that real smile she was already addicted to. "And like I spent the night with the most beautiful woman I've ever known, so overall I'm excellent." "Liar, you need to let me check the wound." Later, he pulled her closer, kissing her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "Right now, I just want to stay here." But Violet was already shifting away, the responsible part of her brain engaging despite the intoxicating warmth of his body. "Alessandro, infection is serious. Let me look." He sighed but rolled onto his back, letting her peel up his shirt. Her shirt, actually, the one she'd given him last night when his was ruined beyond saving. The bandage was still secure, no fresh blood seeping through. Good. "I need to change this," she said, already moving to get the first aid kit from the bathroom. When she returned, Alessandro was propped against her pillows, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" Violet asked, kneeling beside him on the bed. "Nothing, just you take care of people. It's who you are, isn't it?" She carefully peeled away the old bandage. The wound looked better than she'd feared, edges sealed, minimal swelling. "My grandmother always said that's what love is, taking care of someone when they need it." "And is that what this is?" Alessandro asked quietly. "Love." Violet's hands stilled. In the stark light of morning, the word felt bigger, more terrifying. Last night, drunk on champagne and adrenaline and the miracle of reciprocation, it had seemed easy. But now... "I don't know," she admitted, applying fresh antibiotic ointment with gentle fingers. "I know I've felt something for you for a long time, something that made every day you weren't there feel wrong, something that made me stay late at the office just to be near you." She pressed new gauze over the wound, securing it with tape. "Is that love? Maybe. Or maybe it's just the beginning of it." Alessandro caught her hand before she could pull away, brought it to his lips. "I'm not good at this. At feelings, at relationships. My life is complicated in ways I can't always explain. There are things about my family, my business, that you're better off not knowing." "I know enough," Violet said. "I'm not naive, Alessandro. I know what you are." "And it doesn't scare you." She thought about that, about the late-night meetings and the men with cold eyes, about the wound in his side that came from a knife, not an accident. "It should probably scare me more than it does. But the truth is, I've seen you with people. The way you treat everyone at the office with respect, even the cleaning staff. The way you donate to that children's hospital anonymously every Christmas because you think I don't notice. The way you look at me like I matter." "You do matter," his voice was fierce, "more than you know." "Then that's what I care about, not the rest of it." They sat like that for a long moment, her hand in his, morning light painting them both in shades of gold. Then Violet's stomach growled, embarrassingly loud, and Alessandro laughed. "Okay, practical matters, food." He started to get up, winced. "You're staying in bed." Violet pushed him back down gently. "I'll make breakfast." "I don't expect you to wait on me." "Too bad." She was already heading for the kitchen. "You're injured and in my apartment, my house, my rules." She heard him chuckle behind her as she surveyed her limited options. The bread and cheese from last night, eggs in the fridge, some slightly wilted vegetables she'd been meaning to use. French toast, maybe, and a scramble with what she had. Violet worked methodically, falling into the rhythm of cooking the way she'd learned from her grandmother. Crack the eggs, whisk with cinnamon and vanilla. Heat the pan, butter sizzling. The familiar motions calmed the nervous flutter in her chest. The part of her that kept insisting this was all too good to be true. She was plating the food when her phone rang. The office number. Her stomach dropped. It was January 1st. Why would anyone from work be calling? "Hello." She balanced the phone between her shoulder and ear, carrying plates to the bedroom. "Violet, thank God." It was Marcus from legal, his voice tight with stress. "Is Alessandro with you?" She froze in the doorway. Alessandro's eyes met hers, immediately alert. "Why would you think that?" "Because he's not answering his phone, and there was an incident last night. Some trouble with the Castellano deal. People are looking for him, and not the friendly kind of people. Alessandro was already up, taking the phone from her. Marcus, what happened? Violet set the plates on the nightstand, her appetite gone. She watched Alessandro's face as he listened, watched the softness of the morning burn away into something harder, more dangerous. No, don't do that, he said sharply. Tell Giovanni I'll handle it. Give me 2 hours. He paused. I don't care what they said. 2 hours, Marcus, make it work. He ended the call, handed the phone back to Violet. For a moment, he just stood there, jaw tight, and she could see him retreating into himself, putting the armor back on. You have to go, she said quietly. I don't want to. But you have to. Alessandro crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands. This is what I meant. My life, there are always fires to put out, always something that needs my attention. It's not fair to you. I'm not asking for fair. Violet covered his hands with hers. I'm asking for whatever you can give me, even if it's complicated. You deserve better than complicated. I deserve to choose for myself what I want. She held his gaze. And I choose you, even with the fires and the complications and the late-night phone calls. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I'll come back. As soon as I can, I'll come back. I know. But after he left, after he'd changed into the spare clothes he apparently kept in his car, after he'd kissed her one more time at the door, after the sound of his footsteps had faded down the hall, Violet sat on her couch, surrounded by the debris of their celebration, and wondered if she'd been lying. Did she know he'd come back? Or had she just fallen into the oldest trap in the world, believing that wanting something badly enough would make it true? Her phone buzzed. A text from Alessandro, eating your cooking in the car. Best French toast I've ever had. This isn't over, Violet. I promise you this isn't over. She smiled despite the hollow ache in her chest, typed back, be safe. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then always, for you always. The day stretched out long and empty. Violet cleaned her apartment, changing sheets that still smelled like his cologne, washing dishes from a breakfast they hadn't eaten together. She tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything that would quiet the anxious voice in her head that kept whispering. You knew this would happen. You knew men like him don't end up with women like you. By evening, she'd convinced herself it was over. That he'd realize in the clear light of day how impossible this was, how much easier his life would be without the complication of feelings for his secretary. That the magic of New Year's Eve had been just that, magic, illusion, something that couldn't survive in the real world. She was halfway through a pint of ice cream. She wasn't tasting when her buzzer rang. Violet's heart jumped. She pressed the intercom. Yes. It's me, Alessandro's voice, rough with exhaustion. Let me up. She buzzed him in without a word, then stood frozen in her living room, ice cream forgotten, until his knock came at her door. He looked terrible. The exhaustion was written in every line of his body, his jaw tight with pain he was trying to hide. But when she opened the door, his expression softened. You thought I wasn't coming back, he said. It wasn't a question. Violet stepped aside to let him in. It would make sense if you didn't. Nothing about this makes sense. Alessandro shut the door behind him, leaned against it like he needed the support. I spent the entire day dealing with a crisis that could have imploded my family's business. I'm running on no sleep, my side feels like it's on fire, and I have 17 messages I haven't returned. Then why are you here? Because I told you I'd come back. He pushed off from the door, crossed to where she stood. Because every minute I was away, all I could think about was getting back to you. Because for the first time in my life, I found something that matters more than business, more than duty, more than any of it. Violet's eyes burned. Alessandro. I meant what I said last night, about wanting this, wanting you, and I know it's not going to be easy. There are going to be days like today where I have to leave and you have to wait and neither of us knows when I'll be back. But if you're willing to try, if you think you can handle the chaos that comes with me, then I'm all in, Violet. Completely. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of how much I already feel for you, scared that I'm going to fall completely and you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble. Hey, he tilted her chin up, made her meet his eyes. You listen to me. You are worth every single complication. Every late night, every crisis, every moment I have to be away from you, it's all worth it for this. For you. A tear slipped down her cheek. Alessandro wiped it away with his thumb, so gentle it made her chest ache. I don't know how to do this, Violet whispered. I'm not good at relationships, I don't know the rules. Then we'll figure it out together. He pulled her into his arms, careful of his injury, and she buried her face in his chest. No rules, just us. We make this up as we go. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in her living room while the city hummed outside. Eventually, Alessandro pulled back enough to look at her. I haven't eaten since your French toast this morning, he admitted. Violet laughed, the sound watery but real. You must be dying. Little bit. Come on. She took his hand, led him to the kitchen. Let me take care of you. And as she reheated the breakfast they'd missed, as Alessandro sat at her tiny table and told her about his day in carefully edited terms, as they fell into an easy rhythm of conversation and comfortable silence, Violet felt something settle in her chest. Maybe this wouldn't be easy. Maybe there would be fires to put out and complications to navigate. Maybe she'd spend a lot of nights waiting, worrying, wondering. But he'd come back. Despite everything, he'd come back to her. And somehow, that felt like enough. After dinner, they ended up back on her couch. Alessandro stretched out with his head in her lap while she ran her fingers through his hair. He was asleep within minutes, exhaustion finally claiming him. Violet watched him in the dim light from the TV, this dangerous, complicated man who'd chosen her. She thought about the year ahead, about all the unknowns and uncertainties. Thought about her lonely apartment that didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Is he with you? Just want to make sure the boss is okay. She typed back one-handed, still stroking Alessandro's hair. He's safe. I've got him. 3 dots then. Good. He needs someone to look after him. Glad it's you. Violet smiled, set the phone aside. Outside, the city moved into its second day of the new year. Inside, in her small apartment that had never held anything but loneliness before, something new was growing. Not just love, though that was part of it, but possibility. The chance that her story didn't have to be about being alone. That maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stay anyway. Alessandro stirred in his sleep, his hand finding hers, lacing their fingers together even unconscious. Violet squeezed back, a silent promise. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And for now, for tonight, that was more than enough. It was everything. The first Monday back at the office, after New Year's, was supposed to feel normal. Violet had told herself that over and over on the subway ride in, clutching her coffee like a talisman against the anxiety churning in her stomach. It didn't feel normal. Everything looked the same. The sleek lobby with its marble floors, the elevator that always took too long, the maze of corridors leading to Alessandro's office, where she'd spent 2.5 years perfecting the art of invisibility. But she wasn't the same person who'd left here last Friday, and the difference felt written all over her face. Sarah from accounting stopped her at the elevator. Good New Year. Yes, thank you. You. Violet's voice sounded foreign to her own ears, too bright. Amazing. That rooftop party was insane. Sarah leaned in conspiratorially. Hey, did you hear? Apparently there was some huge drama over the weekend with the Castellano contract. Alessandro was dealing with it personally. Marcus said it got pretty intense. Violet's fingers tightened on her coffee cup. Oh. Yeah, something about a negotiation that went south. I don't know the details, but there were a lot of emergency calls yesterday. Sarah's eyes gleamed with the thrill of office gossip. Must be nice to be that important, you know, having the fate of million-dollar deals in your hands. Must be stressful, Violet said quietly, thinking about the wound in Alessandro's side, the exhaustion in his voice when he'd called her last night before bed just to hear her say goodnight. The elevator doors opened. Violet escaped before Sarah could continue, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't thought about this part, how to act at work, what the boundaries were supposed to be now that everything had changed between them. Alessandro had left her apartment Sunday evening with a kiss that had made her knees weak and a promise to see her Monday morning. But he hadn't said anything about how they should handle things professionally. Should she act the same? Different? Was she still just his secretary or something more? The door to his office was closed when she reached her desk. Violet set down her bag, powered on her computer, tried to fall into her usual morning routine. Check his calendar, review emails, prepare the daily briefing he'd go over when he arrived. Except he was already here. She could see light under his door, hear the low murmur of his voice on a phone call. She was printing the daily schedule when the door opened. Alessandro stood in the doorway, perfectly put together in a charcoal suit that made her mouth go dry. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Violet saw the same uncertainty in his eyes that she felt. Then he smiled. That real smile meant just for her, and everything else fell away. "Morning," he said, his voice pitched low so only she could hear. "Good morning, Mr. Marchetti." The formality felt wrong on her tongue after spending the weekend calling him Alessandro, after falling asleep in his arms last night on her couch, while they watched a movie neither of them paid attention to. Something flickered across his face, disappointment, maybe, or understanding. "Can you come in? I need to go over some things before the staff meeting at 10. Professional. They were being professional. Violet grabbed her tablet and followed him into his office, closing the door behind her. The moment it clicked shut, Alessandro's entire demeanor changed. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face as he kissed her thoroughly, desperately, like they'd been apart for months instead of 12 hours. "I missed you," he murmured against her lips. Violet's tablet clattered to the floor, forgotten. She kissed him back, her fingers clutching his jacket, trying to ground herself in the reality of this. "We just saw each other last night." "I know," another kiss, softer this time, "still missed you." "Alessandro." She pressed her hands against his chest, putting space between them even though every cell in her body protested. "We can't do this here. Anyone could." The doors locked, no one scheduled to be in until the meeting. But he stepped back, ran a hand through his hair, and she could see the effort it cost him. "You're right, I'm sorry. I just seeing you out there, calling me Mr. Marchetti like we're nothing more than boss and secretary." "What else am I supposed to do?" Violet bent to retrieve her tablet, grateful for the excuse to hide her face. "We can't exactly announce to the entire office that we spent New Year's Eve together." "Why not?" She stared at him. "Because I'm your secretary. Because there are rules about workplace relationships. Because people will think I slept my way into this job, that I'm using you, that." "Violet," Alessandro's voice cut through her spiral. "Breathe." She did, drawing in a shaky breath. He waited until her eyes met his. "I don't care what people think," he said simply. "And for the record, you earned this position through your own merit. Everyone here knows that. You're the best assistant I've ever had, and that has nothing to do with anything personal between us. But the optics are my problem to handle, not yours." He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I'm not asking you to broadcast anything, but I'm also not going to pretend you mean nothing to me. Not here, not anywhere." "So what do we do?" Alessandro considered this. "We be discreet, professional in front of others, but when it's just us like now, I'm not going to pretend, Violet. I can't." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "Okay," she said softly. "We figure it out as we go." "We figure it out as we go," he agreed. Then, with visible effort, "Now about that briefing." They worked through the morning's agenda, falling into their familiar rhythm. But everything felt different now. The way his eyes lingered on her when she spoke, the way her pulse jumped every time their fingers brushed over documents, the awareness that hummed between them like a live wire. The staff meeting at 10 was torture. Violet sat in her usual seat, taking notes while Alessandro ran through quarterly projections and upcoming negotiations. She'd sat through 100 of these meetings, always invisible, always just part of the furniture. Now she felt hypervisible, certain that everyone could see the truth written on her face. That Sarah from accounting was looking at her too closely. That Marcus kept glancing between her and Alessandro with something like speculation in his eyes. But when the meeting ended and people filed out, no one said anything. No knowing looks, no whispered gossip. Maybe she was imagining things. Violet, a moment. Alessandro's voice was perfectly professional. She stayed behind as the others left, Marcus shooting her a quick smile on his way out. When the door closed, she found Alessandro watching her with concern. "You looked like you were going to be sick in there." "I kept thinking everyone knew, that they were all looking at me and seeing," she gestured helplessly. "Seeing what? A woman doing her job." He moved around the conference table toward her. "Violet, you're overthinking this." "Am I, or am I the only one thinking clearly?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "You're Alessandro Marchetti. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just..." "Just what?" His voice went quiet, dangerous. "Finish that sentence." Violet's throat tightened. "I'm just the secretary who happened to catch your attention. And when you get tired of me, I'm the one who'll have to find a new job because I'll be the woman who slept with her boss and got burned." The silence that followed felt like breaking glass. "Is that what you think this is?" Alessandro asked finally. "Me getting tired of you?" "I don't know, maybe, eventually." The admission hurt coming out. "People like you don't end up with people like me, Alessandro, not permanently. And I'm trying to be realistic about what this is, what it can be." "You want to know what this is?" He closed the distance between them, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "This is me being more terrified than I've ever been in my life. This is me lying awake last night after you fell asleep, watching you and thinking about all the ways I could fuck this up. This is me in a board meeting this morning, missing half the presentation because I was thinking about the way you smile when I say something that surprises you." Violet's eyes burned. "Alessandro." "I'm not good at this," he continued. "At feelings, at being vulnerable. My entire life has been about control, about maintaining distance, about never letting anyone get close enough to hurt me. And then you walked into my office 2.5 years ago with your quiet competence and your kind eyes, and I've been losing control ever since. You hired me because I was qualified. I hired you because you were brilliant. I kept you because you were brilliant. And I fell for you because somewhere between managing my impossible schedule and dealing with my worst moods, you became the best part of my day." His thumbs traced circles on her shoulders. "So no, Violet, I'm not going to get tired of you. If anything, I'm terrified you're going to realize you could do so much better than a man who comes with more baggage than an airport." She laughed, the sound wet with unshed tears. "That's a terrible metaphor." "I'm working on not enough sleep." But he was smiling too. "My point is I'm all in, completely, terrifyingly all in. And if that means dealing with complicated office dynamics and gossip and all the rest of it, then that's what we'll do. Together." "Together," Violet echoed, and it felt like a promise. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Now, I have a conference call in 10 minutes that's going to take at least an hour, and you have that report to finish for the quarterly review, so we should probably..." "Be professional," Violet finished. "Excruciatingly professional." They separated reluctantly, and Violet gathered her tablet and notes. At the door, she paused, looked back. Alessandro was already behind his desk, but his eyes followed her movement. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "you're not the only one who's terrified." His expression softened. "I know, but we're terrified together, so that's something." The rest of the day passed in a blur of emails and phone calls and documents that needed reviewing. Violet fell into the rhythm of work, grateful for the familiar structure even as she remained hyper-aware of Alessandro's presence just beyond her desk. At 3, she brought him coffee the way he liked it, black, no sugar, and found him on yet another call, this one clearly stressful based on the tension in his shoulders. He mouthed "thank you" and reached for the cup, his fingers deliberately brushing hers. Such a small thing, but it made her feel seen in a way she never had before. At 5, people started trickling out. Sarah stopped by Violet's desk, probably looking for more gossip, but Violet kept her answers brief and uninformative. By 6, the office was mostly empty, just the dedicated few who regularly worked late. Violet was packing up her desk when Alessandro emerged from his office, loosening his tie. "Long day," he said conversationally, but his eyes held questions. "Very long." Violet glanced around. Marcus was still at his desk down the hall, visible through the glass walls. "I should probably head home." "Right, of course." Alessandro hesitated, and she could see him weighing something. "I have dinner with my brother tonight. Family thing, can't get out of it. But after, could I come by? It'll be late, probably 9 or 10. The fact that he was asking, that he didn't assume, made her heart squeeze. "I'd like that." His smile was worth every moment of anxiety from earlier. "Good. I'll text you when I'm on my way." They walked to the elevator together, careful to maintain professional distance. But in the empty elevator car, Alessandro's hand found hers, squeezed once, and it felt like a secret language only they spoke. On the subway home, Violet let herself imagine it. Alessandro showing up at her door after his family dinner, spending the evening together, falling asleep in each other's arms. The simple domesticity of it felt revolutionary. Her apartment felt different when she walked in. Not empty exactly, but expectant, waiting for something, for someone to fill it. Violet showered, changed into comfortable clothes, tried to focus on the book she was reading. But her eyes kept drifting to her phone, checking the time. 7:30, 8:15. At 8:45, her phone rang. Not a text, a call. Her stomach dropped at Alessandro's name on the screen. "Hey," she answered. "Everything okay?" "Define okay." His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Dinner ran long. My brother decided tonight was the perfect time to ambush me with some business proposal that's actually a thinly veiled power play. And now I'm stuck here for at least another hour dealing with family politics that make the Castellano situation look simple." "Oh," Violet tried to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "That's fine, you should." "It's not fine," he sighed heavily. "I wanted to see you tonight, Violet. I've been thinking about it all day. And instead I'm sitting here watching my brother play games while my mother pretends everything's normal. Family's complicated." "That's putting it mildly." A pause, then his voice softened. "Tell me about your day, something normal, please." So she did. Told him about Sarah's continued attempts at gossip, about the typo she'd found in the quarterly report that would have been embarrassing, about the coffee shop near the office running out of his favorite blend. Small, mundane things that felt significant because he'd asked. "I miss you," Alessandro said when she finished. "Is that pathetic? We saw each other 8 hours ago and I miss you." "If it's pathetic, then I'm pathetic too." Violet curled up on her couch, the phone pressed to her ear. "I kept looking for excuses to come into your office today." "I noticed. It was torturous, having you right there and having to pretend I wasn't thinking about kissing you." Heat flooded through her. "Alessandro." I know, professional." She could hear the smile in his voice. "But it's after hours now. I'm allowed to tell you that you looked beautiful today, that I wanted to drag you back into my office and make you forget your own name." "You can't say things like that," Violet protested weakly. "Why not?" "Because now, that's all I'm going to think about." "Good." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "Think about it. Think about me. And when I finally get out of this dinner from hell, I'm coming straight to you." Someone spoke in the background, Alessandro's brother, maybe. "I have to go," he said, regret thick in his voice. "But I'll be there as soon as I can. Wait up for me." "I'll wait." After they hung up, Violet sat in the quiet of her apartment, phone still warm in her hand. The loneliness that had defined this space for so long felt different now. Not gone exactly, but waiting, anticipating. She wasn't alone anymore. Even when Alessandro wasn't physically here, she wasn't alone. The clock read 9:15, then 9:30, 10. Violet made tea, tried to read, gave up and put on a movie she'd seen a dozen times. At 10:45, her phone buzzed. Finally leaving. Be there in 30 minutes. Drive safe, asterisk, she sent back. And then she waited, curled up on her couch, for the man who'd promised to come back. For the man who kept his promises. 3 weeks later, Violet was beginning to understand what it meant to be with Alessandro Marchetti. It meant late-night calls when he was stuck in meetings that ran past midnight. It meant learning to read the tension in his shoulders, knowing when to push and when to simply hold him. It meant stolen moments in his office, quick kisses behind closed doors, his hand finding hers under the conference table during particularly tedious presentations. It also meant navigating the curious looks from coworkers who'd started noticing that their boss smiled more these days, that his secretary seemed less invisible than before. But mostly, it meant not being alone anymore, and that was worth everything else. "You're thinking too hard," Alessandro murmured against her neck. They were in her apartment, his now too, in all the ways that mattered, tangled together on the couch on a rare Friday night when he didn't have to work late. "I'm thinking about how much has changed," Violet admitted, running her fingers through his hair. The wound in his side had healed to a pink scar she traced sometimes, a reminder of how this all began. "3 weeks ago, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone. And now I can't remember what that felt like." She tilted his face up to look at her. "Is that strange, how quickly you became essential?" "If it's strange, then we're both strange." Alessandro shifted, sitting up and pulling her with him. "Which brings me to something I wanted to talk to you about." Violet's stomach fluttered. His tone was serious, careful. "Okay. You've been working as my secretary for 2.5 years, and you're brilliant at it. Don't look at me like that, you know you are. But it's not what you studied for, is it?" She blinked at the change in direction. "I studied business management. The job market when I graduated was terrible, and I needed to pay rent, so I took the secretarial position because it was available and you've been underemployed ever since." Alessandro took her hands. "I've been thinking about this, about how I can help you without it seeming like favoritism, without undermining the work you've done to get here on your own merit." "Alessandro, what are you talking about?" "There's an opening in our strategic planning department. Mid-level position, significant step up from where you are now. I want you to apply for it." Violet stared at him. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. You have the qualifications, the experience, and frankly, you're wasted managing my schedule. You should be doing more." He squeezed her hands. "I already spoke to Jennifer in HR. The position will be posted internally next week. You'll apply like everyone else, go through the same interview process. I'm recusing myself from the decision entirely. It'll be handled by the department head and HR. People will think. Let them think what they want. You'll earn this position on your own merit, just like you've earned everything else in your life." His expression softened. "But I'm not going to watch you settle for less than you deserve just because you're afraid of what people might say. You're too talented for that." Emotions clogged Violet's throat. "What if I don't get it?" "Then you don't get it, and we figure out what's next. But at least you tried." Alessandro pulled her closer. "I believe in you, Violet. Maybe it's time you believed in yourself, too." She kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. "There's something else," he said. "My sister's hosting a charity gala next Saturday. It's a big deal, lots of important people, networking opportunities, the kind of event that could be useful for your career." He paused. "I want you to come with me, officially, as my date." Violet's pulse skipped. "You want to go public?" "I want to stop hiding the fact that I'm with the most incredible woman I've ever met." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But only if you're ready. I know it's fast, and I know there will be talk. I won't push if you're not comfortable." She thought about it, about walking into a room full of Manhattan's elite on Alessandro Marchetti's arm, about the speculation, the gossip, the inevitable judgment, about how terrifying and exhilarating it would be. "I don't have anything to wear to a gala," she said finally. Alessandro's smile could have lit up the city. We'll fix that. Tomorrow, if you're free, I know someone who owes me a favor. Tomorrow I'm free, Violet said, and felt like she was agreeing to something much bigger than a shopping trip. The boutique was in Soho, the kind of place Violet would never have entered on her own. Understated elegance, no prices on the racks, salespeople who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. Alessandro guided her inside with a hand on the small of her back, and immediately a stunning woman with silver hair and impeccable style descended on them. Alessandro, darling, it's been too long. She air-kissed both his cheeks, then turned shrewd eyes on Violet. And this must be her, the one you called about. Violet, this is Francesca Morti. She's been styling my family for 20 years. Alessandro's hand tightened protectively at Violet's waist. Francesca, Violet needs something perfect for Lucia's gala. Of course she does. Francesca circled Violet like a hawk assessing prey, but her smile was warm. Beautiful bone structure. We can work with this. Come, Cara, let's see what we have. 2 hours later, Violet stood in front of a three-way mirror wearing a dress that cost more than 3 months of her rent. Deep emerald silk that brought out the dark honey of her eyes, cut to skim her figure in ways that made her look like someone else entirely. Someone sophisticated and elegant and confident. That's the one, Alessandro said from where he sat watching, his voice gone rough. It's too expensive, Violet protested, even as she turned to see the way the fabric moved. It's not. Francesca made a dismissive gesture. And even if it were, you deserve beautiful things, Cara. Let yourself have them. In the end, they left with the dress, shoes that Violet was terrified of walking in, and a clutch that was deceptively simple but probably cost more than her entire current wardrobe. Alessandro also insisted on buying her a cashmere coat that felt like wearing a cloud, despite her protests. You're spoiling me, Violet said as they loaded bags into his car. I'm treating you the way you should be treated. Alessandro opened her door, waited for her to slide in before closing it. Once in the driver's seat, he took her hand. Get used to it, because I plan to spoil you extensively. Alessandro. Violet, he brought her hand to his lips. You've spent your whole life taking care of yourself, never asking for anything, making do with whatever you could afford. Let me do this. Let me take care of you for once. The sincerity in his voice made her eyes burn. Okay, she whispered, but I'm still not comfortable with expensive gifts. Then think of it as an investment in our future. His smile turned mischievous. Because when you're running the strategic planning department someday, I want to be able to say I knew you when. Violet laughed, the sound bright and free. You're ridiculous. I'm in love with you, Alessandro said simply. That makes me do ridiculous things. The world seemed to stop. They'd said a lot of things to each other over the past 3 weeks, confessions, promises, words whispered in the dark, but not that. Not yet. Say it again, Violet breathed. I love you. Alessandro cupped her face, his eyes intense. I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you, Violet Chen, have been for longer than I care to admit, and if you're not ready to say it back. I love you too. The words tumbled out, urgent and true. I've loved you for so long I can't remember when it started. Maybe the first day, maybe the 100th, but I love you, Alessandro, so much it terrifies me. He kissed her then, right there in the car in the middle of Soho, and Violet thought this must be what flying felt like. The week leading up to the gala passed in a blur. Violet applied for the strategic planning position, her resume polished and professional, trying not to think about the interviews scheduled for the following week. Alessandro kept his word about recusing himself, but she caught him looking at her sometimes with such fierce pride it made her chest ache. At the office, their secret was becoming less secret. Marcus had figured it out, she was sure, though he said nothing. Just smiled knowingly whenever Alessandro found excuses to call her into his office. Sarah from accounting had stopped trying to gossip with her, replaced by a cool distance that Violet tried not to let bother her. But then there was Tuesday afternoon, when Violet was leaving for lunch and nearly collided with a woman in the lobby. Oh, I'm so sorry I wasn't. The woman stopped, her eyes widening. Wait, are you Violet, Violet Chen? Violet blinked. Yes. I'm Isabella Romano. I work in marketing on the 4th floor. Isabella had warm brown eyes and an infectious smile. Alessandro's been telling my brother about you. We've been dying to meet you officially. Your brother? Marcus from legal? Isabella laughed at Violet's expression. Yeah, we don't exactly advertise the family connection at work, but he mentioned that Alessandro's finally dating someone and that she's brilliant and kind and way too good for him. His words, not mine. Despite herself, Violet smiled. Marcus said that. He thinks very highly of you. We both do, actually. I've seen your work on the Castellano contracts. That reorganization of the filing system saved our entire department hours of headache. Isabella shifted her bag. Listen, I know this is random, but I'm grabbing lunch at that new place around the corner. Want to join me? I promise I'm not as intimidating as this ambush probably seems. Violet hesitated. Making friends had never been easy for her, but something about Isabella's open, genuine smile made her want to try. I'd like that, she said. Lunch turned into an hour and a half of easy conversation. Isabella was funny and sharp, with none of the judgment Violet had expected. She asked about Violet's background, her interests, seemed genuinely interested in the answers. And when the conversation turned to Alessandro, Isabella's affection for him was obvious. He's different lately, Isabella said, stealing one of Violet's fries. Lighter somehow. Marcus says it's because of you. I don't know about that. I do. The Marchettis, Alessandro's family, they're complicated. Lots of expectations, lots of pressure. Alessandro's spent his whole life carrying that weight. Isabella's expression grew serious. But he looks at you like you're air and he's been drowning. Like you're the first real thing in a world of pretense. Violet's throat tightened. He's the real thing for me too. Good, Isabella grinned. Then we're going to be great friends, because anyone who makes my friend's boss actually smile is worth keeping around. They exchanged numbers before heading back to the office, Isabella already planning their next lunch. And for the first time since moving to New York, Violet felt like maybe she could have this. Friendship, connection, a life beyond just work and solitude. Saturday arrived too quickly. Violet spent the morning trying not to panic about the evening ahead, about meeting Alessandro's sister and being introduced as his girlfriend to people who moved in circles she'd never even glimpsed. Alessandro picked her up at 6, and the look on his face when she opened the door made every moment of anxiety worth it. Cristo, he breathed, you're stunning. It's the dress. Violet smoothed nervous hands down the emerald silk. It's you. He crossed to her, careful not to muss her carefully styled hair as he kissed her. You're going to be the most beautiful woman there. You're biased. Extremely, Alessandro offered his arm. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The gala was at a historic mansion on the Upper East Side, all soaring ceilings and glittering chandeliers. Violet's hand tightened on Alessandro's arm as they entered, overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of it all. Breathe, Alessandro murmured. You belong here as much as anyone else. A woman who could only be his sister swept toward them. Same dark eyes, same commanding presence, wrapped in scarlet silk. Alessandro, finally. She kissed his cheeks, then turned to Violet with open curiosity. And you must be Violet. I've heard so much about you. Lucia, this is Violet Chen. Violet, my sister, Lucia Marchetti. It's nice to meet you, Violet managed. The pleasure is mine. Lucia's smile was genuine. Anyone who can make my brother actually use his vacation days is a miracle worker. Come, let me introduce you around. There are some people you should meet. The next hour was a whirlwind. Lucia introduced Violet to what seemed like half of Manhattan's elite, business owners, philanthropists, politicians. And to Violet's surprise, Lucia presented her not as Alessandro's secretary, but as Violet Chen, one of our rising stars in strategic planning. But I haven't even interviewed yet, Violet whispered when they had a moment alone. You will, Lucia squeezed her hand. And you'll get the position because you're qualified and brilliant. But more importantly, you make my brother happy. That's worth more than any business connection." Throughout the evening, Alessandro never left her side, his hand at her back, guiding her through conversations. His subtle interventions when someone's questions grew too probing. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was something precious. "Having fun?" he asked during a lull, pulling her close as music drifted from the ballroom. "More than I expected." Violet leaned into him. "Your sister is wonderful." "She likes you, I can tell." Alessandro pressed a kiss to her temple. "She pulled me aside earlier, told me not to fuck this up." "Good advice." "The best." He turned her to face him. "Dance with me." They joined the other couples on the dance floor, and Violet let herself get lost in the music, in the warmth of Alessandro's arms around her. Around them, the city's elite swirled in expensive gowns and tailored suits, but she only saw him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For this, for pushing me to be more than I thought I could be, for seeing me when I felt invisible." Violet met his eyes. "For knocking on my door on New Year's Eve." Alessandro's expression softened. "Best decision I ever made. Well, second best." "What was the first?" "Hearing you." He smiled at her eye roll. "I'm serious. If I hadn't hired you, I never would have spent 2 years falling for you. Never would have realized that everything I thought I wanted from life was wrong, that what I actually wanted was you." "Alessandro, marry me." Violet's feet stopped moving. Around them, other couples continued dancing, but she felt frozen, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Not now," Alessandro clarified quickly, though his hands tightened on her waist. "I don't have a ring, and this isn't the proposal you deserve. But someday, Violet, someday soon I'm going to ask you properly. And I wanted you to know that's where this is heading for me. That I'm not just dating you, I'm planning a future with you." Tears pricked her eyes. "You're serious?" "Completely." He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "So if that's not what you want, if that's too much too fast, tell me now, because I'm all in, Violet, forever all in." She thought about the girl she'd been on New Year's Eve, alone in her apartment, convinced that was all she'd ever be. Thought about the woman she was becoming, brave enough to apply for a position she deserved, brave enough to attend galas and make friends and fall in love. "It's not too much," she whispered. "It's not too fast, it's exactly right." Alessandro kissed her then, in the middle of the dance floor, in front of Manhattan's elite and his family and everyone who mattered. And Violet kissed him back, unafraid of being seen, unafraid of claiming this happiness. When they finally broke apart, she found Lucia watching them with tears in her eyes, smiling. Found Isabella and Marcus near the bar, both grinning and giving subtle thumbs up. Found a room full of people who were probably gossiping already, but she couldn't bring herself to care. "I love you," she told Alessandro, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I love you too." His smile was brilliant. "My beautiful, brilliant Violet." Monday morning, Violet walked into the office for her interview for the strategic planning position. She wore a new suit Alessandro had insisted on buying, professional, sophisticated, hers. Her resume was perfect, her preparation thorough. She got the job on her own merit, just like he'd promised she would. That evening, they celebrated in her apartment. Their apartment now, really, since he spent more nights here than at his own place. Cheap champagne because she'd insisted, expensive takeout because he'd insisted right back. To new beginnings, Alessandro toasted. To knocking on doors at midnight, Violet countered. They clinked glasses, and she thought about how much had changed in a month. How the lonely girl who'd spent New Year's Eve alone had become someone who believed in her own worth. Someone who had love, friendship, possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Coffee tomorrow. Want to hear all about the new job?" Violet smiled, typed back. "Definitely, my treat." "What?" Alessandro asked, noticing her expression. "Just everything." Violet set down her glass, moved to straddle his lap, careful of the long-healed wound. "A month ago, I had nothing. No friends, no prospects, no hope that anything would ever change. And now I have you. I have Isabella's friendship, and Marcus being protective in that big brother way, and Lucia planning double dates. I have a job I actually wanted, that I earned myself. I have a future that looks nothing like I imagined and somehow better than I ever dreamed. Alessandro's hands settled on her waist, his touch reverent. You always had all of that inside you. I just helped you see it. We helped each other see it. Violet kissed him softly. You said once that I became the best part of your day, but you became the best part of my life, Alessandro. You gave me permission to want more, to believe I deserved more. You deserve everything. He pulled her closer. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. Later, curled up in bed with Alessandro's arms around her, and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Violet thought about that New Year's Eve. About loneliness and desperation, and the moment a knock on her door had changed everything. She thought about the year ahead, the job she'd start next week, the friends she was making, the love that had transformed her world. Thought about Alessandro's promise of a future, of someday, of forever. Hey, Alessandro murmured sleepily. You still awake? Yeah, just thinking. About what? Violet smiled in the darkness. About how glad I am that you got stabbed. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into hers. That's probably the weirdest thing you've ever said to me. I'm serious. If you hadn't gotten hurt, you never would have come to my door. We might have gone on forever, both too scared to say anything. We wouldn't have, Alessandro said with certainty. I would have found another excuse eventually, maybe not as dramatic, but something. Because you were already essential to me, Violet. That night just made me brave enough to admit it. She turned in his arms to face him. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. Now sleep, tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow's Monday. Exactly, the first Monday of the rest of our lives. Violet laughed but settled against him, letting his heartbeat lull her towards sleep. And as she drifted off, she thought about new beginnings and second chances, and the beautiful, terrifying, perfect chaos of letting someone love you. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility. Inside, in an apartment that was no longer lonely, two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of violence and vulnerability, and a midnight knock held each other close. And somewhere in the quantum space between asleep and awake, Violet sent up a silent thank you to whatever cosmic force had brought Alessandro Marchetti to her door. Best New Year's Eve ever. The end.